Gummy bear.
It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this for May 10th, 2024. For the next hour or so, let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, new video game hardware is coming, and not just from Nintendo. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host at Game Mess Mornings. It's Tamoor Hussain, everybody.
Hello,
Tam, how are you doing?
YouTube.
Hello, YouTube. It's Friday. Get your asses ready.
Let's go.
I said asses in the first 30 seconds again.
Yeah, this video is cooked.
Oh, we're so washed. Oh, no. We're done. Oh, well, that is what it is. Now, hey, you know what that means? We're free to do whatever we want now. There's no laws anymore.
Yeah, take that. Who's the CEO of YouTube currently?
Dr. YouTube.
Yeah, who's the YouTube name that we curse every time something goes wrong?
I can't remember. It was that lady for a while, but I think did she retired or whatever?
Anna Wojcik? What? Wojciki? Wojciki? Is that her name?
Yes,
yeah.
That sounds like a name I'd be afraid to curse, actually. So,
curse you, Anna, and your damn 3-second rule. And if it's not Anna, whoever replaced her.
Yeah, you look like an Anna. I don't know what that means, but you do. Yeah, it's hey, it was a hell of a week, huh?
Yeah, it is, I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit, but I feel like this is I don't know if you know how they say you have to really hit rock bottom before any sort of like progress is made in rebuilding yourself.
Yes.
This might be rock bottom. I feel like we've come close to rock bottom. I think this might be rock bottom because we talked about this on Spot On this week. Like, people are doing stuff that is weird behavior, like, and doing it in a way that's like, are you a moron?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you stupid? What's going on? Like the whole thing where it's like getting rid of everyone who made Hi-Fi Rush and then saying we need Hi-Fi Rush. Where it's like, no, it's like cosmic stupidity. Something weird is happening here. Like, and I feel like it's an indication that we're either close or we have hit rock bottom, which means technically the only way is up.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, we have to hit that point eventually, right? I mean, eventually we do rebound in some way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm hopeful. I think every time people hear like, oh, Nintendo Switch 2 could come a little bit later and GTA 6 could come a little bit later, I think everyone else is like, well, the whole industry's cooked then, so we give up.
Yeah. It is bad right now, and it's really hard to see past it. But if you're an optimist, which I very much am not, I'm incredibly cynical, and I fear the worst happening all the time because I'm going to be honest, I've had a lot of times, most of my life, where the worst usually happens. So I'm a worse kind of person. But I think it's very easy to miss the other story, which is happening like underneath all the doom and gloom of the industry, which is indie games right now are absolutely popping off in a way that is absurd. Like, and it's not
in every tier of indie game, right? It's not just like one kind.
In my desperation to try and make the industry feel normal and good again, I don't really even think of them as indie games.
No,
like I've never think of them. No, this is gaming.
Yep.
At best, we can say there's a bunch of like AA games out there now.
Yeah.
Like, and there's hope in that, knowing that we used to have a tiered system where it was like you'd have these major blockbusters, but you also had these games in between that were just really good. It didn't cost a crazy amount of money, came from smaller teams or people taking risks, and those were like a key part of the gaming landscape. And they kind of got muscled out by these bigger corporations because they were absorbed by them. Mm-hmm. And then it came a 2-tiered system where it was major games from major companies or smaller games from major companies, and then the indie game, you know what I mean? Like the real like one person made this game, and the in between was very, very like vague, and it just didn't seem to exist. Now it feels like the indie part of it or the smaller game part of it
Filling that vacuum.
has like, yeah, it's like broken away from corporate ownership.
Yeah.
So that they can't own that area of it as well. And now it feels like there's a middle ground emerging again with new studios appearing, sometimes in the ashes of, layoffs and stuff like that, but also as initiatives from people who are looking around and being like, I want to make something different for ourselves. And, if anything, Animal Well is an example of someone that cares about games being in a position to publish games. Like Donkey, for all his like kind of
Bravado or whatever.
bravado and that kind of stuff, still made a good decision on what game could be cool.
And made every good decision along the way with it too, I think.
And that's gamer behavior.
Yep.
Like that is good gamer behavior.
It's possible that it's possible to be a good gamer.
Yeah, yeah. And like I hope that the developers of Animal Well got a good cut of this whole, pie. Good piece of that. And maybe there is something there, maybe there is something to be excited about and hope for the future. It is rough right now, but there is this glimmer that if you're optimistic enough, you can look at and say that's where we're going, and that's where I want to push us.
Yep. For me, it's like I always think of like the early days of gaming as like, and that brings me to like, being at Blockbuster renting games, and just any game off the shelf, anything was possible. It was probably made by a small team in a garage or in a small office somewhere, and anything could happen. And then in the intervening time since then, the corporations came in and took over, and now we've sort of been at their mercy. And it feels like, oh wait, the garage band video game developers still exist, and they're over here. And I was always happier with them anyhow. Why am I getting hung up on what these corporations are doing and their infinite growth and the disgusting ties of their lives and all their decisions? Who cares? All these people over here are making cool stuff, and the next game I pick up could be the weirdest, coolest thing I've played in forever, and that's what always made me happy with gaming. And I can have that still. What am I doing here? So
the corporations really ate up the oxygen on every kind of video game that was being made, and for like better or worse, there was the idea of for example, Ubisoft starting to make these smaller games that were kind of more artsy. That was great. But in hindsight, it also meant like it was another part of a major corporate, company or corporation absorbing another kind of layer or another facet of the video game industry and business to fuel its own growth. And we've reached a point now where that is no longer viable for those corporations. Like,
not at the moment.
If Hi-Fi Rush is a good example of that. Like that is a game that would have been made by a smaller team, and Microsoft or Xbox, Bethesda, whoever it may be, Tango got them, and they made a fantastic game. It was award-winning. It was winning awards as recently as a few weeks ago, and the corporation behind it still canned that team and is like, we need more of those games. It's like, they're not capable of making it work, which means maybe some freedom for the people that want to make those small games,
Yep. I think the natural state of video games is the small developer just building some creative. They're in the 90s, the biggest studios in the world were id Software, coming out of nowhere, coming out of a lake house in Shreveport, Louisiana, right? And then the corporations step in and sort of like they feel like they're the default, but it's like, nah, that is abnormal. That is something glomming onto something that was special. And
even back then, where I feel like the major corporations or the companies that we identified still had that mentality, like Clover within Capcom. Capcom was a major developer, not the level that it was now, but Clover felt like you had to tell people Clover is a Capcom studio back then, I remember. Because they were making games that were so weird that people just didn't make sense to them. They were like Beautiful Joe, and Okami and God Hand, one of my favorite games ever. Like most people were like, what the fuck is this all about? What is this game? But yeah, like I hope that we get back there again. And the important thing is what you said, Jeff. It's like the natural state is not the way it currently is. And one of the worst things that's happened is people have been tricked into believing
that is how it is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And like now more than ever, like we have to encourage people to buy games that are from all kind of tiers of development and business. Like I've been playing Indica's I have my ups and downs with it, but when I was done, I was like, I'm glad I played that. There was parts of it which I really disliked, but I'm glad I played that. And like Hades 2 is another example of it. Hades is that game that comes from a small studio who's in between corporate and indie that is punching so far above its weight when you think about it that it stands toe to toe with the corporation.
And that team stayed together. They're making a better game. And now what's happening with Hades 1? It's got more players than it's ever had. It can work.
I cannot express how much I admire Supergiant. Like I cannot, and like obviously I'm biased. Yeah, I'm biased towards it because they're a San Francisco-based developer, and they have people that like used to work at GameSpot that I idolized when I was young, and folks who have worked in other parts of the industry before that I enjoyed their work of. But like the stuff they're doing is so like soul enriching when it comes to video games. When I feel bad about where we're at, I look at a company like Supergiant and I say, I hope there's more like that soon.
Yep. I hope this is like, a model that other people can try to get to. I think every studio needs to be their own thing or can try to be their own thing. But if they treat Supergiant as like an inspiration, that would be the ideal, instead of like, hey, maybe one day we'll get acquired, which I understand why people want that. That's a big payday, and that's a motivating factor. But if you can just make it work like Supergiant has, that would be ideal.
Be game developers again and not tech employees. That was the worst part of it. The tech mentality kind of infected video games, and it all became about like making money, or like there was a lot of like, I'm gonna make a studio to make a game just so I can sell the studio and be a millionaire. And it's like, that is tech mentality. You're trying to make some sort of new fucking idea that then is like sold to a major corp, and then you retire forever. That kills games.
All right, let's explain what we do here. Most weekdays, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe even some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you are watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings, or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. All right, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with Xbox president says studio closures were made to keep business healthy for the long term. This is from Chris Scullion at VGC. Xbox president Sarah Bond has spoken more about the company's decision to close 4 Bethesda studios earlier this week. It was revealed it was revealed on Tuesday that Xbox was shutting down Redfall developer Arcane Austin, Hi-Fi Rush developer Tango Gameworks, Mighty Doom developer Alpha Dog, and support studio Roundhouse Games. In an interview held at the Bloomberg Tech Conference in San Francisco on Thursday, Bond was asked by Bloomberg's Dina Bass how players should be expected to understand these closures. Bond replied that the closures were the outcome of a longer-term commitment to ensure the health of the business. It's always extraordinarily hard when you have to make decisions like that, Bond said, before referring to earlier comments she made about the industry being flat last year despite a slew of high-quality game releases. I'll go back to what I was saying about the industry, and when we look at those fundamental trends, we feel a deep responsibility to ensure that the games we make, the devices we build, the services that we offer are there through moments, and even when the industry isn't growing and you're through a time of transition. And the news we announced earlier this week is an outcome of that and our commitment to make sure that the business is healthy for the long term. A couple things here. This is the answer she sort of meandered to after kind of a little bit of a word salad where she seemed,
my God.
and definitely a lot of people are picking up on that, and that like is frustrating, right? That she would not have predicted that she would have to answer a question about this. At least that's what it seems like, and I think that's a fair criticism.
Yeah, I like it was easily one of the worst answers you could have to a question about the state of your studios, having just closed a bunch of them and effectively laid off a bunch of people. Like that is, as far as leadership goes, is pretty shocking. Like as for people who were impacted by it and people who remain, that was like, oh, that's your answer to that question, and it didn't really say anything. Like it didn't really. The question, if you listen to the question again and what the answer was, which I encourage people to do, it's like there's two different conversations happening there. And it's a classic like executive and like person who's PR trained move where it's like say enough words that people forget what the words were to begin with and just meander for like 10 seconds and then end with something definitive and like almost uplifting, and you're good. People will move on from it unless you've got a journalist or an interviewer that is good and keeps focused on the subject matter and it pushes for a better response, which is extremely rare. And it's even more rare when you're like doing some sort of major, press conference style event like Bloomberg were doing. Like they're not going to be like, what? You didn't say anything there. Say that again, but do better this time.
Yep.
Like, it's never going to happen.
I've done at GameSpeed. I've done these kinds of fireside chat interviews, and it's like you get the occasional opportunity to be like, well, actually, I asked about that, but like the time considerations. There's an audience there. The person's there on their time, so it's like it's a difficult thing to manage. But regardless, this isn't about the interviewer. This is about Sarah Bond not being prepared for answering for their choices, their decisions, and they have to own that.
Not being prepared or choosing not to. Like let's not just say like she's incompetent. Like that's not what we're saying at all. Like, I've spoken to Sarah a couple of times. I've seen Sarah. Sarah's like very smart, very eloquent, very like confident in what she's doing. I know it. And honestly, part of like the disappointment comes from an expectation that she would have something more meaningful to say because she seems like that kind of person based on previous experience. Yeah. And that is what I wanted, and it's disappointing to not get that. And it's just like that is the ultimate issue here. It's not like she chose not to do that. I'm assuming that she could do it. The decision was made to not do it.
Right.
Whether that's because she didn't have a answer to go, or whether she was told like don't answer this without.
Regardless, it's more disappointing in that situation.
It is disappointing, and it's kind of like it feels like an undoing of many years of corporate Xbox imaging and messaging and PR is happening, where they've tried to present themselves as the most human of these major companies. We talk to our developers, they're important to us, and now like we're having these moments where it's like, the mask is slipping and you are a corporation and you will fall back on this stuff when it comes time. Whether that's saying things like, we need games like this from after laying off people who make games like this, or just like kind of deer in headlights trying to answer a question about, the issues that your company is going through, and the human cost of it. It is a tricky time for Xbox, and they're walking through many minefields with rakes all over them and all kinds of other pitfalls. But like, they need to like get it together better than this, and it's a lot of goodwill being lost here.
That takes us to the next story. This is also part of that interview. I believe Xbox president says every game from its studios will launch day one on Game Pass. They're sort of reiterating that. There's some questions about that. This is from George Yang at GameSpot. While we already know that Microsoft's first-party games are included in Game Pass on launch day, Xbox leadership has once again reiterated that fact. In an interview with Bloomberg at Bloomberg Tech in San Francisco, Xbox president Sarah Bond said, "You're going to see some more really big games going into Game Pass later this year." The interview interjected to say, "From Activision," and Bond replied, "Across the whole slate." Listen, that's not 100% definitive, but if they're saying this and then Call of Duty isn't in Game Pass, which is the what we're talking about here, Call of Duty games in Game Pass, part of the rumors coming out of all the fallout from the studio closures was, hey, there's some conversation, some debate internally about whether or not Call of Duty should go into Game Pass. And I think that was inevitable. They were always going to have that conversation. But at the end of the day, if Call of Duty is not in Game Pass, for me, that feels like, and that's it for Game Pass. That's the end of the story. They no longer believe in that platform. So what's your expectation at this moment with her saying this? Do you think Call of Duty later this year will be in Game Pass? Barring any issues with like contracts with Sony that might still be outstanding that I'm not aware of.
I 100% think so.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to go in.
It has to, right?
Excuse me. We asked you for a quote for Spot On yesterday, and about like the future of Game Pass and whether what's happening kind of indicates a shift in business models or an intention behind the business for Xbox. And one of the things that you said was kind of Game Pass saturation has reached its point. Like it's reached saturation point where anyone who's interested that is likely to take the initiative because they like video games and pay for Game Pass has done so. That leaves people who are probably not interested or at all, or interested enough that they need to be lured in with something. And that second group is probably the Call of Duty group, where if you tell them, hey, you don't have to buy Call of Duty, you can pay this subscription fee and you'll get Call of Duty as well as a bunch of other games. Do you want to do that instead? I feel like that's the next step for growth. And I don't think it's going to be like gargantuan and exponential, where it's like, this is enough to sustain the business model going forward. Everything is fine. But I think it will be a healthy chunk of people who subscribe. There'll be an uptick enough for them to send out a press release to say, like, Game Pass subscriptions are on the rise because of all these new games we added. I feel like they are pushing super hard for that, and it's only a matter of time before it happens.
Yeah, I think that it's natural for them to have doubts and skepticism, and for them to reassess what they have with Game Pass in this moment, where they have saturated like that first group of people, and now it's like, okay, we can see this through. We have a choice to make. Do we sacrifice the revenues we can make from Call of Duty in this moment to continue pushing with Game Pass, or do we, pull the ripcord and say, well, Call of Duty's different and we keep getting that revenue in, but sort of in that choice, sacrifice Game Pass. And I think, you have that conversation, you have that debate. I think that's fine. But at the end of the day, you've come this far, you've seen Game Pass this far through. You should make the big play here and actually put it in Game Pass and continue down that route and try to actually make that work. And I think that's what they're going to end up doing. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to see. And it maybe some weirdness this year. Again, I'm not sure if there's like any lingering agreements with Sony. I think it's supposed to have expired by now, but I don't know. If not this year, next year with Call of Duty, and then from that point forward, that's what I expect.
Yeah, I think you're on the mark there. It's the one thing that is almost predictable about what Game Pass is doing next. Like, to us, the people that analyze it and try and like figure out what the next move will be, like having that happen, it makes too much sense for it. It's everything else around it that is still very, very unclear. Like what is the strategy with Game Pass and presenting it as an attractive offer or a proposition to people? If the only thing that you are like, I feel like the Call of Duty strategy is kind of some part an admission that we can only really get more people to subscribe using major franchises.
The biggest things, yeah.
The biggest thing. I would love to know how much Starfield moved the needle.
Probably it doesn't feel like that much.
I don't think so. And I guarantee you, if that had been the Elder Scrolls, it would have been different.
Yep.
Which kind of is scary because it pushes Microsoft into that mentality where it's like, oh, we have to have big names on the games, the front of the game's box art, to have any sort of impact on the Game Pass subscription rates. Which would probably be why, stuff like Tango goes away. Like Tango does not make, unless Tango makes, I don't know, zombies for Call of Duty. That's probably like, if they put in the Evil Within 3, for example. Like the Evil Within is a well-known franchise for us people who love games and are like paying attention to it. Do you think a random Joe Schmo sees the Evil Within 3 on a thing and goes like, I'm subscribing to Game Pass? It's not happening. And same goes for like pretty much every studio. And I was
all these years, Tim, I was operating under the assumption it's like something like Tango Gameworks makes sense because of course you have to have the big games to get people in there in the first place. That's what gets people to sign up. But then you want to keep people happy with all these other games and this variety. And so it's like one hand it's helping the other. And but Starfield's got to hit, and then you got to have Elder Scrolls, and you got to have something else. Oh, and they're getting Call of Duty. Okay, that's great. And then that's going to create this huge infrastructure under which all these other studios can work. But I think what has happened here is Microsoft couldn't get the big games to work, and that sort of caused the whole thing to fall down. And now those other studios are getting punished for that. And it's like
100%.
You look at what the way something like Netflix operates, where people talk about, hey, they should do stuff week to week because that's more enjoyable for a lot of people. And it's like, yeah, but that's not how they think about their business. Their entire business is getting someone to sign up in the first place, and having a new show drop all at once seems like it's much more effective at getting that first credit card purchase onto their system in the first place, rather than being like, okay, jump on now and maybe the rest of the season is good, or wait until the end of the season is here and you've heard the whole thing is good. And by that point, you probably forgot, or you come up with an excuse like, oh, I'll watch it later. I think they build their whole business around that initial moment of getting that purchase. And that's what those big games are. And they haven't had those so far.
It is much easier to market a new show than it is and generate enough interest to push subscription revenues or rates up than it is to market a show on a week-to-week basis. Imagine if they had to do like advertising campaigns to ensure that people are always aware of a new episode of their big new show. That's going to be crazy expensive. And because of the way Netflix operates, they would have to try and do that for as many shows as possible. And that is so expensive and so like time consuming, and it feels like an impossibility. So it is way easier to or just drop an entire show and market that in one, do that once, and then let the subscription revenues come, subscription rates go up, and then do it again for the next thing. And like the reason, I mean, that's why we saw like from the makers of Elder Scrolls constantly for Starfield. And like the problem is like it just didn't work. Like Starfield had its own set of issues, but like it was a clear indication that people don't see a new thing and go, oh, amazing, I'm going to sign up for that in the same way that they do for like Netflix yet. And I feel like there's other pieces to the puzzle that haven't been figured out.
Yes, this is the thing I've been thinking about all week, is that it's Starfield and Xbox have this same exact problem, where it's like they have this long-term vision and they don't have the other part of the puzzle, the initial like, hey, why do I care about it right now, figured out. What's fun about playing this game in the moment? Yeah, you built this game to last 10 years and for me to replay it over and over again, but when I land on a planet, I'm bored. Okay, well, that's a problem. And for Xbox, it's like, okay, you have this disruptive solution of Game Pass, and it's going, and then you're like, oh, and it's going to be great once we have those 2 billion players playing on mobile wherever Game Pass is streaming. Okay, but what are the games right now? It's like they just put the cart before the horse in both scenarios, and they've paid the price now. And it's like you got to get those fundamentals first, and then everything else might just figure itself out once people care about the games you have and the gameplay you have. Yeah,
I mean, a case in point right now, like Hellblade 2, like the marketing around that game is non-existent. Like I've seen people being like, oh shit, Hellblade 2 is out very soon, and that is a gamer's game. That is like a gamer-ass video game where people who are into video games are aware of that, but it also has crossover potential, where it's like this is something that it's award-winning for so many reasons. It's not just because it's a game, but because of the kind of awareness it brings to mental health and the way that's worked into kind of the game itself. So it has potential. It's got it's very, I would say I am maybe like I'm not an expert, but I would on paper say it's more marketable than the average game, unless you're a Call of Duty, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But like there's nothing going on there. Like I haven't seen a single advert that's like, this is coming to Game Pass, like out in the streets or like on TV or wherever. Like not even like in the cinema when I'm watching a movie or anything like that. I don't see it anywhere. Like it's, and that is, I don't understand it. Like I don't understand the reasoning.
I mean, I think marketing's expensive, so they've been trying to shorten their marketing campaigns. This is like 2 weeks beforehand, though, right? That's nuts. Today's poll question is about this, so we'll talk about that more in a bit. All right, let's see here. Microsoft to launch mobile game store in July. This is from Jordan Midler at VGC. Microsoft will launch a web-based mobile game store in July, seeking to compete with Apple's App Store and the Google Play Store. Speaking at the Bloomberg Technology Summit on Thursday, Xbox President Sarah Bond said the store will be accessible across all devices, all countries, no matter what, independent of policies of closed ecosystem stores. The store will launch with Microsoft's own games and additional content for said games. Eventually, the store will be open to third-party publishers as well. This web-based store is the first step in our journey to building a trusted app store with its roots in gaming, an Xbox spokesperson told Bloomberg. Tam, to me, this is cart before the horse again. This is...
Yeah, 1,000,000%. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, what is this, man?
Right.
Ah,
First of all, no one's asking for this, right?
Understand who wants this? Who is gonna pay for this? Like, I. Good luck to you. This is gonna fail.
Yeah.
I can tell you. I feel like we're at the point now where we can see a move happening and go, "That's gonna fail."
Mm-hmm.
And we've reached that point. Like, this is web based. You're launching for what games? Like, what is it? Like, you have a store right now.
It's going to be Call of Duty Mobile and a bunch of other, like, it's going to be Candy Crush. Those games are not going to get taken out of the App Store, right? So I think
no, that's what I'm saying. Like, the ecosystem. Like, do you have enough? Like, what devices are these for? Are there a bunch of Microsoft phones out there now?
No. So here's how I think it's going to work. I think in the future you're going to get Call of Duty Mobile on your on your iPhone through the App Store, and when you do that, it's going to like either give you an option or just automatically install an icon that opens up the web-based Microsoft Store that you kind of sign into, and then you can make purchases for those games through that store. Okay, the Samsung Store is included on Samsung phones. No one uses it. The Amazon App Store gave away free apps and games for literal years, and no one even fucking remembers that thing was. You could sideload that on any Android device. Hell, you could use that thing on Amazon like tablets, and people barely use that store. Fortnite had the Epic Store when it was the biggest game in the world, still is in a lot of ways, but when it was like undisputedly the biggest game in the world, and it's like, okay, well, to play Fortnite on these devices, you need to go download this store. That didn't work. Now they are by making it web-based, they're bypassing a lot of these issues. The biggest issue is that humans just want to use the default. We are a default species. We do the thing that is right in front of us, and we're just going to hit the button that makes it work. Now, if you can get purchases to happen by default in the app that go to the web store, okay. But if people have to add their credit card again and it's already on the App Store, they're just going to do the App Store.
Yep.
This is really a really challenging play. I am struggling to see the vision here.
I don't understand the vision at all, and it seems like the indication based on that quote is like we're going to start with a web-based app store and then move to a actual app-based app store,
right?
And it's just like I don't know who this is for, man. And also, like, are you ready for the potential battles you're going to have with like platform owners as well? Like, I don't know.
So they're counting on regulators. They're counting on regulators forcing Google and Apple to do this, which is why I think we've heard those rumors recently that Xbox, like in the future, we might let you put other stores on the Xbox. You might be able to sideload Steam onto Xbox. They're putting themselves in a position so that's like they can, and I think this is a long-term play. This might be tin hat a little bit, everybody, so stay with me. I think it's a long-term play where they're like, okay, if regulators force this to happen, we're going to make Xbox look like, hey, we are already in line with this. So this is the natural way of things. It should be like Windows. And that way, in the future, we can put the Xbox Store on PlayStation when regulators force Sony to do that, and then the PlayStation just becomes Xbox. Now, I know that sounds crazy because it is, and I don't think that'll ever happen, but I think Microsoft sees a future where they can manipulate the market and manipulate regulators to get to that point. And this, again, cart before the horse, right? Why are you doing all of this Machiavellian bullshit instead of just making games people want? It's that's what's happening here.
I think I saw a quote floating around. I don't know how much, not quote, but like someone tweeted this kind of like a thing about them speaking to former Xbox people and saying like it's not Xbox games anymore, it's Microsoft games.
Yeah.
And this is one of those. I didn't really think too much about it back then, and now seeing this, I'm just like, oh, it kind of is. Like, this is again cart before the horse. Their game making business right now. And we've got big announcements coming off and all that kind of stuff. Is just shambolic. Like, it is a mess. And the fact that they're like, we're gonna make a app store for mobile games, it's like,
you couldn't even get us to buy games on Windows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your house is on fire. What are you talking about? Like, you're trying to buy a condo when your house is on fire? Like, what?
And you, like, in your own house, you can't get us to do what you want on Windows. Yeah. You're not going to be able to figure this out on someone else's operating system. You're just not. Come on, be honest.
Yeah. And the thing is that we're not saying don't do it, like, ever.
I just really struggle to see how it works personally.
We don't understand it. And it's like, is this your, it's like, oh, this is your priority.
Right, yeah, and it's not what I'm asking for, right?
And it's not it's not the thing that like got Xbox to where it is, which is making good games for people who play video games on their video game systems, whether that's a PC, whether that's an Xbox. You're not prioritizing that, and that part of your business is like kind of all over the place, and your whole thing is like, we're gonna make an app store for mobile games. Something's gone real wrong here, man. Like,
yep. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to talk about some new hardware that got announced and a lot more right after this. All right, we are back, and
I think it's really funny that I've been like really upset at Xbox today, and I'm just drinking tea from an Xbox cup. This is like,
I like
and also,
Xbox.
like, I feel like
do.
saying like we're getting upset about this because we give a shit. We
I do give a shit.
About this stuff. Yeah, and like I want to see Xbox succeed desperately.
I always like that they were like they made these big plays. I do. I think Game Pass is still a really great idea. It's just, man,
honestly, they make great cups. This thing is incredible.
Yeah,
like, I would rather you got out of mobile games and got into the cup making business, because banger,
slam dunk, it. Absolutely,
this is incredible. This thing keeps tea like cold, warm for like 5 hours.
It looks extra insulated. It really does.
It's super insulated. I will buy this instead of going to your app store.
It's got the vapor chamber. Yeah, that's where the vapor technology is now.
Yeah.
All right. The Roger Ally X handheld is a mid-gen refresh. This is from Haley Williams at GameSpot. After the first two models of the Roger Ally released last year, Asus is ready to reveal the next iteration of the handheld PC gaming device. While the upcoming Roger Ally X isn't a proper second generation for the handheld, the new model addresses much of the major feedback from the device's early adopters. While a ROG Hog Ally 2 is on the cards at some point, Asus told The Verge that's not the plan for the Ally X, which is more of an optimized version of the original device, similar to the mid-gen refresh of a traditional console, or, the Steam Deck OLED. Sporting the same chipset and screen as the original, the Ally X won't see a substantial performance or quality boost over the base device, and instead will focus on quality of life improvements. One of the main improvements is a bigger battery, as this was one of the main complaints players had about the original Ally. We're not looking at 30 to 40% more capacity, Asus Senior Vice President Sean Yen said about the improved device. We're looking at way more than that. Okay, this is, I think, in one hand, a little bit like, hey, well, it'd be nice to have some improved performance. But for me, this is exactly what I want from the Roger Ally X. That battery is the whole reason I don't really think about the Ally compared to the OLED, because the OLED really just nailed it with battery. That device lasts way more, long enough to be like, this is a viable device to use in every scenario. If the Ally X can get into that range, it's like, oh, okay, well, this thing performs better too. That's very exciting. So I'm very happy about this, Tam. How about you?
Yeah, Yes, I understand. This is the thing that I have my Roger Ally as my like in bed system, but I have a charger plugged in and the Roger Ally plugged in at all times. And like I just put it under my bed, and then when I'm getting ready to play, I pull it out. I don't take it off charge; it's still connected,
right? And
I play it and then put it back. The battery is a major issue, and the fact that they're, like you said, they want to get into that convenient, take this out and play with it range. That is a smart move for them. I think we said it before. Again, transparency, they sent me one to check this out and that kind of stuff.
Likewise.
I genuinely was not expecting to enjoy this thing, and I'm shocked at how much I use it. I will say the same criticism that I have had the entire time that we've had. The operating system is pure dog shit.
Yep, hate Windows.
And it is the most unusable nonsense I've ever seen.
It just literally just breaks on me sometimes, and I just can't enter a password.
It breaks. Like it will like minimize the game, and then I won't be able to get back into the game.
Shit won't go to sleep when I hit the sleep button.
It is Armory Crate and whatever else they got in there is I genuinely think it's a major factor in making that device less usable.
Agreed.
So I would focus on that part of it, like get that sorted as well. If just because when they said like quality of life, I was like, thank God they're gonna fix this Armory Crate nonsense. They're not, but it doesn't seem like that. They haven't talked about it in a major way.
I hope that is just going unsaid, because that's obvious. I hope that's where we're at with that. And it's like we know it can be better, even on Windows. Ioneo, I have the Ioneo slide, which is basically the same thing as a Roger Ally, and it has the Ioneo software over top Windows, and that stuff is very responsive. It's way better than what they have with Armory Crate. So we know it can be better. So yeah, fix that up. And then just work with Microsoft on the few niggling little things where it's like, hey, this thing just doesn't know how to handle going into sleep mode when you have a game running. Can we just like create a new scenario to make Windows operate better for that? It's like that's possible when Microsoft knows about it. So I'm hoping.
You know what dumb thing? Like, it's just an indication of the whole thing overall. It's such a small thing, but it annoys me so much. When I turn it on, Windows, the operating system, connects to my Wi-Fi, right? So it's connected. And then Steam opens in big picture mode or whatever, and it says not connected to Wi-Fi. So it does not. Oh, it yeah, does that not, one. Yeah, Steam does not talk to the operating system to say we are connected to Wi-Fi. It thinks we're not connected to Wi-Fi, even though it's actively using the internet. It's like small things like that. It's like, what's going on with this thing, man? Like, that's not how it works on Steam Deck.
No.
And it's because there's this annoying operating system layer underneath it. I wish they would like, and it's just a bad look, man. Like, yep. I just hope they figure out that element of it. Like, don't make it so gross and like so unintuitive to use for people like us. Because if you're trying to get that into a larger, mainstream, non-gaming, fanatical kind of people, they're going to be like, this thing it feels like one of those cheap knockoff consoles, which it very much is not. It is on the high end.
And they're going to add more RAM as well. So it seems like a lot more RAM, a longer SSD slot. They're also moving around the pieces of the motherboard so that it gets hotter further away from the SD card slot. This caused a lot of problems, and I don't think they ever truly fixed that issue. So this will fix that. And I think this is what I want, Tam. I don't want this handheld PC gaming space to be like a race to the moon. And it's like, you just released something, we're going to release something. In a lot of ways, before the Steam Deck, it was that way. I think Valve releasing the Steam Deck OLED let everyone know that this is, hey, you know what? We have devices, we have a spec. Let's kind of stick with that. Let's take a breath. Let's make a lot of other improvements, because these are consumer electronics devices. They're not just a GPU with a screen. That's not what we're trying to do here. It is something that people actually want to live with and use. So let's improve the usability. And I think taking a talk and a TikTok back and forth pattern to be like, okay, let's just focus on making everything better is really welcome in my eyes. So I'm glad that Asus is doing this as well.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Some Nintendo news. Nintendo president on keeping Switch sales going and successor announcement having impact on those sales. This is from Nintendo Everything. Nintendo made its first official mention of new hardware this week, which will be announced within the fiscal year ending March 2025. However, the company still needs to sell Switch hardware and software, as that's its main source of revenue currently, and it has pretty sky-high expectations for both those things. Asked about whether announcing a Switch successor will impact sales momentum for this device, Nintendo President Shintaro Furukawa did tell one investor this week that there could be some impact. The company will look to keep sales going with new software and generating demand through other means, such as those who have seen the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Furukawa stated, Nintendo Switch hardware sales remain relatively strong, but we are now in the system's 8th year, and we recognize that it is becoming more challenging to maintain momentum as time passes. Even so, during last year's holiday season, many new consumers picked up a Nintendo Switch system for the first time, particularly children and families in markets outside of Japan. We will release new titles this fiscal year, and in addition, many people who have watched the Super Mario Bros. Movie through various means since its theatrical release. So with factors like that, we believe we'll be able to continue to generate new demand. Tam, they expect to sell about 13 plus million Nintendo Switch systems this year. They did about 15.5 million last year. That's a big number for the 8th year. So they're just like a small little decline in sales. Do you think they're going to be able to hit that with like what we know about the release slate at this point? Or are they going to need like at least one more big game and then, something else to happen for them?
I'm trying to think of whether they have I was going to say whether they have a Mario Kart-esque game like that, as in like in terms of market penetration.
Right.
And I don't think they do, but also they have Mario Kart. Like, it's still out there and available.
It sold 1.5 million copies last quarter.
Yeah, so I feel like they'll be okay to that extent.
Yeah,
I
think
I
they
don't
get to
know
that Pokemon game early next year, right? Because that's still in the fiscal year. I think I always I was like, oh, they need something this holiday. It's like, well, that Pokemon game is probably going to launch in the first part of next year because that's what the last Pokemon Legends game did. So that's probably the thing that's really going to prop it up, right?
Yeah, I think so, and I don't think they're going to introduce a new revision at this point. Like, it's over, because that's just something that usually gets hardware sales a little bump. But I think they're done with the OLED now. But I've learned not to count out Nintendo. They always sound like they're doing the most crazy thing possible. Where they're like, we're gonna sell 13 million of these, and you're like, who's buying these? Everyone has one, and somehow they still sell a crazy amount of these consoles. So I wouldn't be surprised if a new bundle comes along, maybe a new color or something like that.
What do you think about the chance for a price cut?
Unlikely. I don't think it's likely. I feel like price cuts happen very quietly for Nintendo, and it's usually when there's another platform that is like taking the world by storm and everyone forgets about the previous one, and they either release a new revision of it very quietly, or they quietly cut the price on it and just move on. Like when the Wii U came out, for example, the Wii remained full price for a really long time until they released that one, which was like Brick Wii, which is like, it doesn't have anything on there. It's designed to give to your grandma and just like won't connect to the internet, doesn't have a bunch of like features, and that I think that did a decent like job of propelling their sales higher up.
It actually did. It wasn't even available in every market. I think it still did pretty well.
Yeah.
I think once the Switch 2 gets announced, it will have a small impact on sales. But if they like have a Switch Lite like special edition that goes along with, doesn't even get bundled in with that new Pokemon game, families and kids will swoop in and buy a lot of that. And by a ton of that, they won't even be paying attention to the Switch 2, because they'll just be like, hey, no, we're getting something for this new Pokemon game. And that will do a lot of the sales for them. They also expect to sell like something like 165 million pieces of software, which is also enormous. So they have big eyeballs for this next year. We'll see if they're able to actually deliver on that.
Yeah, I don't doubt. I'll never doubt them when they say something absurd. Yeah.
Rumors have been going around about Switch 2 tech specs. We've talked about this in a couple places. Figure we could just do it once again, sort of reiterate everything that's been happening. This is from Nintendo Everything. Some fans believe that they've uncovered new tech specs for Switch 2 and have apparently done so in a bit of a bizarre way. Believe it or not, the information seems to have originated from customs and shipping data. Fans have been keeping an eye on shipments sent between Nintendo, Nvidia, and other parts manufacturers. March shipping information only just became viewable this week, and references to a number of new shipments with new code names have been found that many believe are components for the next Nintendo console. While not confirmed, it's thought that the Switch 2 will feature two 6GB RAM chips for 12GB of RAM in total. While we don't know if it will be LPDDR5, which is low-power DDR5 RAM, or DDR5X RAM, which is like slightly faster, it will seemingly run at speeds of 7,500 megatransfers per second. And to like decode that a little bit,
that is almost as fast as Sonic moves.
That's the way I was going to put it too. Yes, that's pretty good. That's going to be really, I think a lot of developers will see that and be pretty happy. How does that stack up to the current Switch? The system makes a use of 4GB of LPDDR4 RAM with speeds of up to 3,200 megatransfers per second. So yeah, it's going to be much faster. Elsewhere, Switch 2's storage apparently comes in at 256 gigabytes and will use UFS 3.1. That's what's in most phones and most smart devices. There's a handful of devices that use UFS 4, but these are like when a phone says it has an SSD, typically this is what it's referring to. It doesn't have like a real NVMe SSD or anything like that. This stuff is going to be plenty fast enough, especially since Nintendo is likely building the device for this, has a CPU with like probably hardware decoding and decompression for that data on the storage device. And we've heard the rumor that they've shown off like Breath of the Wild at Gamescom, was it? And they were showing that off specifically, like, look, it doesn't have any loading times. So if what you're hoping for is fast loading times, it seems like that's what they're going for with this.
That is faster than the rate Kendrick Lamar is releasing Drake diss tracks.
See, I'm so glad you're here to help people understand what I'm trying to say.
That is how fast it is.
Okay. The current Switch only has 32 gigabytes of storage, which peaks at around 300 megabytes per second. The UFS 3.1 can do 2100 megabytes per second, so 2.1 gigabytes per second. That's plenty fast enough. There's a handful of other things. People think the code name is Muji, M-U-J-I.
I love going to Muji. Muji's great. You know what? I went to Muji recently, and they have this thing here. Like it's like a little box that you put in, and you can wind up your cables so they're easier to store and keep together, and you can stack them. It's really good.
Muji's number one for sure.
Muji's fantastic.
Nintendo's president Shuntaro Furukawa discussed development, sales, and plans for. We talked about that. Custom data. Yeah, we hit. Oh, yeah. This is the other thing. They think there's going to be a built-in microphone in the Switch too, which that's like
so you can hear all those baby gamers babbling into your ears when you're playing online.
Right. It's like I get why they're doing that, because it's like they're probably going to have improved online features. But I think my least favorite thing about the PS5 is that built-in microphone. Not because I ever have it turned on, because other humans have it turned on when I go into a game and I hear their fat, meaty hands slap it against that dumbass controller, and then their family in the background yelling at them, and I hate it.
Yeah, it's not great. I feel like we don't need the microphone thing. Like Nintendo, your ass at online games. Just leave it. No one's playing.
Isn't that
no one's
so
playing
ominous,
games online.
right? They're putting a microphone in there. Nintendo, oh honey, what are you doing?
Yeah.
No,
it's like they keep
don't.
adding features that like indicate like, oh, they might be taking online games seriously. Never. No,
right.
0%.
They think they are.
It's all a trick.
Right. It's absurd. I'm excited to see how they present it, right? They'll probably look at what we have, and it'll be so ass. And we'll just oh my God, can we just have Discord, please?
It'll be like the microphone is only used to locate the device if it's lost. You can talk to it and be like, where are you? Where are you? And it'll be like, I'm over here.
That's really good.
That's what
it doesn't even work for online. It's just for talking to some stupid thing. It's oh God, you're talking to your
your new Switch as a walkie-talkie.
Jan says he hopes it sticks out of the console. I like a telescoping microphone. Oh my God,
yeah. It's an actual headset. It's like one of those headsets that you have to put on.
Right. It honestly doesn't even like telescope in. It just like sticks out, and you kind of like you like point it at your face or whatever.
It's a boom mic. So you have
the
to,
boom,
like, put on it
oh man, okay. Oh Nintendo, I can't wait to see what you're doing here.
But it's made out of Labo, so it's Labo boom mic.
It's cardboard. Hey, they confirmed that this thing was going to get announced in the next fiscal year because of stuff like this. This thing's going to be leaking. This thing's in manufacturing right now, it seems like, at least the very early parts of that. So probably going to get more details. But as it stands right now, this thing sounds like, with all these, what we know about these specs, sounds like it's going to be like PS4 Pro level, which is pretty impressive. That does take us to our next story. Let's just get into that real quick. Nintendo on game development resources says development will inevitably become longer, more complex, and more advanced. This is also from Nintendo Everything. During Nintendo's financial results briefing Q&A this week, President Shuntaro Furukawa was asked to weigh in on the company's game development resources. He was also asked how many resources have shifted to the new system following Switch. Furukawa brought up how Nintendo has continuously expanded our development resources over the past several years through the recruitment of recent graduates and mid-career hires. Just a weird way of putting it. Also, rather than pursuing mergers and acquisitions, the priority is to focus on its own development as well as external partners. Another interesting mark is that Furukawa mentioned game development will inevitably become longer, more complex, and more advanced. Basically, he's like looking around, be like, "Hey, we have been able to stave off what a lot of the other companies have done because we don't make 4K games." I don't think this device has Nintendo making for real 4K games, but they probably do have to start making assets that look good being output at 4K, and so they have to consider some of that stuff, and that will cost more time and resources. That's what happened to everyone else, and it's coming for Nintendo as well. They can't really avoid this. They have put it off, and they've sort of played the tortoise versus the hare when it comes to technology, but they do have to keep up in some ways, and they're here now, and it's like they can't avoid it, right?
Yeah, I feel like it would be good to know what the market saturation level or the penetration level is of 4K TVs and other displays, because I feel like that's when that is a good indicator of when Nintendo has to do this, because it's basically like if everyone is playing our device on a TV that by default outputs like this, and our every time they plug in our console it looks gross, then we have to make this move right now. I feel like, based on vibes alone and nothing more educated, like 4K TVs are now to the point where they're affordable enough that
Oh yeah, default.
the average person will have them by default, if not now, for the next few years.
Oh yeah.
So I think that pushes them into making sure that their assets are at least decent looking on those bigger TVs, so that they don't really look like they've lost. They're like behind the times in a way that will encourage people to look elsewhere for video games.
Yep. It's Jesse in chat says, I've looked it up before. It's roughly 55% of all new TVs are 4K as of a year or two ago. And really, Tam,
Nice.
I'm in the suburbs. I go into a Walmart. Like all the 4K TVs are like $300 now. That's what people are buying for sure. I think, there's legacy. People still have their TVs from 10 years ago, definitely. But those are getting replaced pretty fast.
Yeah.
This is unavoidable. Yeah, this is how it goes. I think Nintendo being mindful of it and trying to keep their development in a way where it's like, let's keep the scope in check, and when it does get out of bounds and goes crazy, let's make sure it's something like Zelda, where it's like it's more about the gameplay experimentation than anything else.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, last story here. Leaker Midori says Sega's current plan is to make games like Persona and Sonic into annual franchises through remakes, DLC, etc. This is from My Nintendo News. Proven Sega Atlas leaker Midori has provided further insight into Sega's upcoming plans for some of its biggest video game franchises, such as Sonic the Hedgehog, Like a Dragon, and Persona. The leaker says that the company plans to do it to do it by releasing new titles, remakes, and remasters, DLC expansions, and other media. As well as always, we will have more, or have to wait and see more. This feels like, hey, Capcom has something figured out where they pretty much have a new Resident Evil about every 12 to 18 months. And those games aren't like small, those are huge. And some of them are remakes, and some of them are new games. We should be replicating that. That sounds like exactly what Sega's going for with this. Now, I don't know how well that works for Sonic. I think it works really well with Like a Dragon and Persona. And hopefully they can figure something out with Sonic. How do you feel about this strategy?
Yeah, I think you're right in that. I feel like they could biff it, but right now it does make sense to me, especially, and like I'm more like willing to try it because the last remake they did was really good. Like Persona 3 remake was fantastic. And if that is the quality that they're aiming for in this new cadence of releases and strategy for releases, and I'm willing to allow to see that happen, because if they do like what they did for Persona 3 for Persona 4, fantastic. If they go back and try and make like the older Persona games more modernized, even like the SMT games are fine, but like if they start remaking some of the older ones, fantastic. The Yakuza games I'm interested in, because I don't know how much scope they have for remakes of that stuff, because I feel like all of those games up until the current ones are now available, and they look great and they play great, so I don't think it needs that. I think with that they probably are leaning into the DLC side of it. I can't think of many of the, I don't know if any of the Yakuza games have like a legitimate expansion to them,
right?
A DLC expansion to them. So I feel like there is a opportunity there to add more episodes to, I don't know, Ichiban's story post fact, after the ending is done. Spin out, I don't know, Lost Judgment into an episodic series of some sort, where it's like, hey, he's basically a private investigator, so we can
here's
just add
case.
a few new there's a new case every now and then, or like, and build a kind of ongoing like drama around the world of Lost Judgment. That would be cool. So I feel like the strategy, the language there seems very, the language used is what we traditionally associate with the worst things happening. Like it is the many failures of annualizing are what keep us from like really seeing any potential in this. But Sega hasn't done this stuff before, and it currently has a track record of caring about the franchises and doing right by them. So maybe the kind of actual plan is much better on paper than we realize. At the very least, I'm willing to give it a shot here and there because, like I said, Persona 3 was great. They've been knocking it out of the park with Yakuza, and even the spin-off games like Judgment, I guess, Lost Judgment is technically a spin-off of the Yakuza series. Good game, both first one and second one. And then the Ichiban stuff from Yakuza / Like a Dragon has been great. So they've earned their kind of goodwill and the opportunity to try it. And then they also have that other stuff coming as well, right? Like they're doing a new Golden Axe and Crazy Taxi and etc. etc. So they have a more robust business model and more robust portfolio and pipeline than most people realize, and the yearly release DLC thing feels like it could, if done right, complement that really well.
Yep. Yeah. As long as they don't like force themselves to stick to the yearly release. If it does slip to like 18 months, just do that. Go with things like Capcom releases some of those things earlier in the year because it's like, yeah, that works for us, and it's never like backfired on them. So, just go with what works for the game development cycle that you have. I just wish that Sega could have also found a way to like make this strategy pair up with what like their PC stuff, so that like Relic could still be at Sega and Creative Assembly get treated a little bit better, maybe. But hey, the things have changed over at Sega. All right, we have a poll question from yesterday. Let's see here. Have you seen an ad for Senua's Saga Hellblade 2? Let's see. 16% said yes. 84% said no.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah, Tam, I said yes, but I think I was counting that tweet that everyone hated on Twitter, and I don't know if I've seen anything else. I've heard people like mention that they've seen an ad on Reddit and maybe YouTube, but I don't have ads turned on like most of my video platforms. I subscribe to things to avoid that stuff. I don't know. This game feels like it's in a weird spot in terms of, can it possibly do enough for them to consider it a full success? I don't know.
I mean, like, I hope it does really well. I am a huge fan of that studio, and I'm excited for the sequel. Recent events feel like if they only add more pressure to what this game needs to do. And if anything, right now we have a lack of clarity on what is deemed a success for Microsoft.
Right.
Because, the award-winning game that sold pretty well and everyone is saying was the best thing that Tango has made in a really long time wasn't good enough, even though they said prior to that it was like passing all milestones that they predicted for it.
Yep.
If that game is deemed not a success when they say it was a success, and we don't know what a success is, I don't know if I feel good about what this game is coming into. Having said that, it's basically one of the few games that they have right now that even stands a chance of like blowing up in a major way. And Ninja Theory is a very talented studio, so I'm expecting it to be of high quality.
Same, and I bet the marketing does pick up here in the next couple of weeks. Who knows if it's going to be enough, though. All right, got a new poll question. We'll get to that here in a second, though. In the meantime, Tam, why don't you tell people where they could find you on the internet, what you have going on, and then we'll talk about what's going on in Giant Bomb.
What do I have going on? I'm just working. Spot On should be out today. Lucy and I talked about the
looking forward to
stuff, obviously. We have a quote from Grubb on it. And then, so later today, I think there's a Unprofessional Fridays happening. I'm not sure what
you know what? And on Sunday, June 10th, June 9th, well, I think it's June 9th. Yes, that's right, because it's 6/9. Nice. We're having a live show in Los Angeles. You all should buy tickets and come hang out. It's going to be good. It's going to be really fun. It's
going to be really fun.
It's where I'm at with it. Like every time we talk about it, I get more and more excited. And it's like I was getting the scheduling figured out for the couch for the 2 nights before. And now I'm like looking at the live show. It's like we're just gonna pile all of us on there at the end of the night and have some fun and talk about how we're feeling. I cannot wait.
It's gonna be great. So make sure you grab it. June 9th at the Bellwether Theater in LA.
Yep.
Tickets are on Ticketmaster right now. If you go to any of our social platforms in Giant Bomb or even our personal ones and scroll for a little bit, you'll probably find a link out to it.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's going to be not just us. We have some really cool guests that are coming. We're doing our absolute best to make sure that if you pay for a ticket, you will get your money's worth.
Yeah.
We know that it can be tricky for people to get there, and so if you're making the trip, we hope that we're trying our best to make sure that you feel when you leave like that was worth it. And if you live in the city, it's like still tricky to make the time and pay the money to get there. So try and come if you can. We'll do our best to make sure that you feel good about what you're seeing and paying for.
Yeah. Yes. The Jan points out that Emma said that he can't go through a table without a stunt coordinator. So if you know a stunt coordinator, or one that can pretend to be to Emma, help us out.
I can coordinate a stunt. I'm sure I can do that.
I believe in you. Absolutely. All right. New poll question. Will you use an Xbox mobile game store? We'll talk about that on Monday on Game Most Mornings. We'll get the results and talk about it on Giant Bomb. Speaking of Giant Bomb, later today, as Tam pointed out, we will have a UPF. We're going to do a grab bag. There's a bunch of these indie games coming out. We're going to play them. It's a crazy idea.
Nice.
We're going to play them on the internet for you. And then BCR.
Bombcast for Vengeance?
Yes, Bombcast for Vengeance. After that, we'll probably talk about those indie games and kind of the indie games that have been coming out this week. A little bit over talking about all the Xbox news. So I'm sure it'll come up, but mostly I want to talk about the good video games we've been playing. And then I think Jan said that we should do a draft of animals. We're each going to draft a team of animals and have people vote on who has the best animals. And
this sounds great.
I am obsessed with this idea. That's such a good idea. He's like, was it weird to draft animals? I'm like, no, that's incredible. We're doing that.
Save this for the live show.
I think we can have a play on this idea in a lot of different ways. So I'm excited. Do humans count as animals, Brady? I don't know. We'll probably have that conversation. I'm going to say probably not. All right. I think that's going to do it for us. Tam, thank you so much for hanging out with me and talking about video games, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you once again. I love doing this every Friday. It makes me feel great. Makes me feel part of the Giant Bomb crew. And
without a doubt, man,
I do a lot in the background.
You do so much.
I do love doing stuff in the foreground as well.
Tam's been so helpful with the SGF at night stuff, guys. So yeah, just absolutely thank you for hanging out with me. Can't wait.
Rob's been killing it.
Can't wait to get out there in LA with you, man. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. You're the best audience in gaming. It's the reason we do it. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye. All right, we are